First, my background, I study landscape evolution, geomorphology, but also how the ways the landscape, how they develop over time and how they react to changing in climate forcing. It gets into interactions between ecosystems and landscapes and between humans and landscapes, that it's not just climate change that people and our land uses and our patterns of development are reacting to. It's the way we're changing the landscape really directly through our land uses. So we think about the impacts of global change. It's not just climate change, although that's what people usually think of first, but it's much more broad in my mind. It's the changes that are happening on the globe in recent decades in a big way. The direct human manipulations of the landscape and the ecosystems and all the feedbacks that has with how the world operates are just as much a part of it as the climate forcing is. So that's my view of what the global environmental change track covers. It's not just climate studies or even climate impacts or climate mitigation, although there are students that have studied climate change modeling or the mitigation of coastal sea level rise or adaptation to various climate impacts. But since it's broader than that, it involves the human component of the system so thoroughly, as far as I'm concerned, it's less well defined than just a climate related focus, at least at this point. So other students, a lot of students that have been in GEC in the past have studied things like corporate sustainability, that you wouldn't think of directly. I mean, it's obviously tied up with climate change and the changing face of the globe. So it's all very related, but I guess the point is just about anything anybody does in the Nicholas School could be seen as fitting into global environmental change. And conversely, all of the people that go through global environmental change could find homes in other programs, in other tracks within the MEM program. So what does define GEC? To me, two things. Primarily, it's the flexibility. That if you look at the list of requirements, typically tracks have a pretty prescribed set of courses that students take, and then some wiggle room around the edges and some electives. Maybe choose X classes from this list. GEC is not like that at all. It's we've got a list of classes to sort of help you see what classes have worked in the past to fulfill these different categories. But those are just, the lists are just examples. So you're encouraged to come up with any class that you think would fit into, say, the basic science category, or the tools category, or the policy and policy-related category that.
Policy governance.
Pardon?
Policy and governance.
Governance?
Yeah, I think it's
Management.
Management. Thank you. So we do have requirements. You have to do a certain number of credits in each of these three categories. But which courses you choose you've got maximal flexibility in this track. So it's a really good track for people that have their own ideas for what they want to study that don't quite fit into the prescribed set of courses in other tracks. That might not be all of you. And for some of you, some other track that sort of gives you less burden of decision making might feel more welcome. But if you would feel constrained in other tracks and have interests that you could see fitting into this matrix, GEC lets you do your own thing within these constraints. The other thing that distinguishes it compared to most of the other tracks is a heavier foot in science. There's basically 5 credits worth of science courses, basic science of global change it's called. That takes some explaining, because given this broad umbrella that I just described for global environmental change, that does not mean just hard natural sciences necessarily. This is basic science, whether it's physical or biological or social sciences. So what distinguishes a course, and this question comes up a lot with specific courses, what puts a course into the basic science of global change category versus the policy and management? And there are, in a lot of courses in the Nicholas School, quite a bit of overlap between these two. But to me, the key difference is whether the course is primarily focusing on how the system works. And the system might be human decision making. So for me, economics courses often fall squarely into basic science of global change because the human decision making is a key part of the system. You can define the system, of course, in many different granularities, but that could apply to a course that studies ecosystems too. I mean, maybe there's some emphasis on how we best manage particular species or ecosystems. If the course is got more of a heavy foot, predominance of the focus is on how ecosystems work, understanding the nature of the system, then it's going to fit into a basic science. If the predominance of the focus is on how do we best make the system work the way we want it to, then it's going to go into policy and management. And there are a lot of courses that are ambiguous, certainly from the title, sometimes even from the syllabus. They do some of both. And you have to decide, after maybe going to a couple of courses, a couple of lectures at the beginning, and maybe talking to the instructor, does it focus primarily on how the system works or more primarily on how we manage it best? It's sometimes going to take a little bit of judgment. If you feel good about after doing that it really focuses more on what we're defining as basic science in terms of how the system works, then you just have to make a short argument if it's not clear from the title or the syllabus that that's true. Write a paragraph, bring it to me, or write an email, and I'll say either that sounds good or I'm not sure that would look good later on. Let's work harder on either finding a justification or not trying to stretch it that far. I'm dwelling on this because this is when people get to their second year at GEC, the most common, not predominant for everybody, but the sort of tricky point that comes up most often is people finding that they don't easily have enough classes to fit into the basic science. So again, that can be social science as well as natural science, but we've got to keep in mind you can't just take all policy. So that's the two things that really distinguish GEC are the flexibility, but also the fact that you need to be interested in science of some sort. More, or, compared to the other tracks, you need to have a significant interest in science to go along with the policy and management, of course. But